Hi. So this is the story of Oppenheimer. So we all have to know uh, the story or the biography of him before we get into the theater to watch his movie directed by Christopher Nolan. And the reason is now any other movie it would be a spoiler if I would tell the story of the movie. But this one is different because if we don't know the particular people that he had come across his life, the story is going to be a messy one. We won't be able to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So we have to know each and every person that is featured in the movie. So I'm going to tell you guys about his life and how it all went. Not going to spoil the whole thing. But I have to introduce each and every particular individual that would be featured in this movie. So Oppenheimer himself is featured, and he lived in the US, born, raised in New York. So the four scientists, the initial four scientists, are the most important scientists, including Edward Teller. Edward Teller. These are the five most important scientists involved in the production or the invention of the atomic bomb. Albert Einstein didn't directly involve in this. So, and there's another five important UK scientists which whom Oppenheimer had to deal with during his life. And there are some important German scientists as well, whom we have to know a little bit about to understand the background of Oppenheimer. And then there's two more important people, and there's one more important person here. So this is how the story goes. Oppenheimer was actually born to a Jewish father. He was really rich, a businessman, a textile businessman. He even had paintings of Picasso and Van Gogh. So it's a clue about how rich they were during that time. He was born in 1904, and he graduated in 1921 at the age of 17, and then he would fly to UK, to London, and start his postgraduate studies at the Cambridge. So at Cambridge it was a quite different place, because Oppenheimer was a person who loved to deal with theoretical stuff rather than experimental stuff. But Cambridge was full of experimentalists. So let's start with J.J. Thomson, who discovered the electron, and he tutored Ernest Rutherford, who was a doctoral student of Thomson. Rutherford himself discovered the proton, and then comes James Chadwick, who is a doctoral student of Ernest Rutherford, who discovers the neutron, which will be really important in the production of the atomic bomb. So, which was discovered in 1932. And so they are actually teachers and students. And Oppenheimer was under Ernest Rutherford and Patrick Blackett. So this Patrick Blackett, it is believed that he gave a quite miserable life to Oppenheimer. In the movie itself, we see Patrick Blackett asking him to stay at the lab and do the experimental stuff rather than going for the lectures. But this guy really loved listening to the lectures and gathering information so that he could produce his own theories, formulate his own theories. And Niels Bohr was also a mentor to him. So the life at Cambridge was a quite miserable one for Oppenheimer. Actually, the movie begins with him poisoning his teacher. There was an apple on the table of Patrick Blackett, which Oppenheimer poisoned with cyanide, potassium cyanide, which is believed to be cyanide, but not proven. The movie depicts for the dramatization purposes. And fortunately, Patrick Blackett didn't eat it. In the movie, we see Niels Bohr trying to eat it, and Oppenheimer prevents him from eating it. And another story says that he actually confessed about his wrongdoing with his friends, and the friends had told Cambridge about the incident or his attempted murder. Uh, then the Cambridge investigated, but his father was too rich. He came to the UK and negotiated with Cambridge. He wasn't charged for attempted murder, and then he wasn't even expelled from the university. He was allowed to study and continue his studies, and he was only asked to consult a psychiatrist and continue his treatment. So Niels Bohr, as depicted in the movie, comes and introduces him to Max Born and asks Max Born, who is a lecturer at Göttingen University in Germany, and suggested Oppenheimer to go to Göttingen rather than staying in Cambridge, which wasn't a good place for him. And he really loved the stay at Göttingen under Max Born, because these people, the Germans, were really into theoretical physics rather than experimental stuff. So the life at Göttingen was a really good one for Oppenheimer. Most of these UK scientists were experimentalists, and they were non-Jewish, but many of the scientists here and the scientists here were Jews, including even Albert Einstein, as far as I know. So probably, let's guess, many of the Jews are not experimental people. They loved theoretical stuff. I really don't know, but that could be a conclusion that we could arrive depending on the information we have here. So he went to Germany, and he even delivered lectures. He had a really good set of students, and the students called him Oppie rather than Oppenheimer. So he also met this genius called Werner Heisenberg at Göttingen. Heisenberg, by the time, had discovered, formulated the theory of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which is a quite fascinating principle. If you had gone through that, you might not know how fascinating that is. And then Oppenheimer, and by that time, even Heisenberg had formulated the theories and the foundations of quantum mechanics, and he had even received the Nobel Prize for Physics for that particular finding. Many of the scientists we have mentioned here have had a Nobel Prize during their lifetime, except for Oppenheimer. That is also a quite fascinating story, which I'll be telling at the end of this video. So Heisenberg, later on, after about 15 years following the beginning of World War II, would go on to attempt to produce the atomic bomb for Germany, and Oppenheimer for US. And they were really good friends during the 1920s, but they chose two different paths and went on to produce atomic bombs or or nuclear fission for their own countries. So Oppenheimer, after finishing his studies at Göttingen, he flew back to the US, and he was a really good scientist related to quantum physics, who had a really good knowledge about it. And USA didn't have such many scientists as much as UK and Germany did by that time. But as Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, and many of these Jewish scientists believed that it's not going to be a good future for them to stay in Germany. All these scientists I have mentioned here were in Germany, except Oppenheimer, who is a citizen of USA. So Enrico Fermi, Hans Bethe, Edward Teller, Leo Szilard, Albert Einstein, they all were in Germany, and they flew to the US. And these scientists didn't. They chose to live in Germany, though they were Jews. Many of them were Jews. They decided to stay in Germany, being patriots to their nation. So Oppenheimer, with the help of the top 4 scientists here, tried to produce the atomic bomb later on, and many of these scientists had won a Nobel Prize even. So it was Leslie Groves, the general, as I remember, an army general, who persuaded Oppenheimer to join the project regarding the production or the invention of the atomic bomb, which is called Manhattan Project. This happened in 1939. But the story before that, it was quite different. In 1933, Ernest Rutherford and Albert Einstein, both in 1933, said the atom cannot be shattered into pieces so that we can get so much energy out of it according to E equals mc squared equation. So what they told was nuclear energy was not possible by that time, and there was a good reason for that. For us to split the nucleus into two, we need a certain subatomic particle, which they initially used in 1932, the proton, because that was the only known subatomic particle apart from the nucleus by that time, which they used to split the nucleus into two pieces, which is called nuclear fission. And if you split it into two pieces, let's take uranium, which is one of the most common elements used to produce atomic bombs. If you split up a single atom of uranium, the energy release would be enough to such 20 atoms. If you split such 20 atoms, the energy release will be enough to raise a single particle of sand. So you can imagine a particle of sand is really small, there's no doubt about it, but an atom is extremely small compared to the size of a piece of sand. So 20 atoms, energy of 20 uranium atoms, splitting a uranium atom would produce energy. Splitting of such 20 atoms would raise a particle of sand. So that is the amount of energy, so much energy that is stored or that is released during nuclear fission. So by this time, the only known particle that could help us to split the atom was the proton by 1932. So two scientists sent like about billion protons, and only one proton went on to split the nucleus of a uranium atom. Why? Because nucleus is positively charged, proton is positively charged, so they had to provide so much energy, and only one proton out of billion protons will go on to split the nucleus of a uranium atom. Why? Because both are positively charged, there's a repellence, so the repellence is so much that the reaction or the nuclear fission wouldn't take place as anticipated. So this is a huge problem. That's why Rutherford and Albert Einstein thought that nuclear energy wasn't possible. But in 1932, James Chadwick discovered the neutron. Neutron was an uncharged particle. Neutron it doesn't have a charge. So once the nucleus of an uranium atom is placed and the neutron comes and hits it, it's not a quite difficult process to produce. So the neutron comes and hits the nucleus of a uranium atom and splits it. So that thing was actually theoretically possible, but it was actually done by Otto Hahn and Strassmann in 1939. So after 7 years following the discovery of the neutron. But Leo Szilard, who is also another genius, in 1933 believed that this could be possible. So it was only a belief which wasn't practically done. So Otto Hahn, with the help of Strassmann, really actually did it in 1939. And then in the movie we see one of the colleagues of Oppenheimer was having a haircut while reading a science journal, who saw this experiment. The journal had it explained. So he saw this experiment and the result of it. So he suddenly ran away out of the salon. He was having the haircut, had only partially cut hair, and went on to meet Oppenheimer and tell the discovery. But Oppenheimer just went on to a blackboard and he did some math and explained to his colleague it's not possible to split the atom. But this colleague went on to, the next day, he had reproduced the results of this experiment. And he called Oppenheimer, and he later on, the colleague later on said, it only took 15 minutes for Oppenheimer to have a look at this experiment and believe, or that come to a conclusion that the experiment is true, and this experiment, if could be done in large scale, it could even go on to produce an atomic bomb. It only took 15 minutes for this genius to understand how devastating would the consequences of nuclear fission would be. So in 1939, even Leo Szilard knew that the atomic bomb was possible. How? You can't make an atomic bomb just by hitting or colliding a neutron with the nucleus of a uranium atom, because the energy release would be really small. So we'll have to send multiple or millions and trillions and billions of neutrons to hit the nucleus. So that is not possible. So they believed if one neutron hits the nucleus of a certain atom, maybe uranium or something else, and the atom splits, and it will release 2 neutrons at least, which will go on to split 2 more nuclei, and then 4 more neutrons will be released, 2 from each nuclei, which will go on to split 4 more nuclei. That will release 8 neutrons, so on, so on. So you can see it's going to be an exponential increase in the number of atoms split per unit time. That is called a chain reaction, which was understood by Oppenheimer and Leo Szilard. So they both knew this is possible. Let's say the atom splits and only a single neutron is emitted, so that reaction is not going to be an exponentially developing chain reaction. For the chain reaction to happen, at least 2 neutrons had to be released, and they found later on that uranium U-235 isotope would go on to release 2.4 neutrons at an average. So this discovery was groundbreaking, and they knew. Leo Szilard wrote a letter with the help of Albert Einstein, which had the signature of Albert Einstein, regarding the consequences of the discovery made by Otto Hahn. And they believed that Hitler would go on to produce the atomic bomb before they would do so. In 1939, on September 1st, Hitler invaded Poland, commencing World War II. And by the time of this discovery, Hitler had invaded Czechoslovakia as well, which had enough uranium ores. So Hitler had the technology and the resources, which was all written in this letter, and Einstein had signed it, and they sent it to the President of US, who was Franklin D. Roosevelt by that time, and the President took it really serious. As a result, he asked Leslie Groves to go on to produce an atomic bomb before the Nazis do it. So Leslie Groves recruited Oppenheimer and these scientists, which I have mentioned here. Enrico Fermi is the first scientist to produce a nuclear reactor. So even before the production of the atomic bomb, nuclear reactor was produced by Enrico Fermi. So he was good at that. Hans Bethe is the person who actually took care of the theoretical parts of the production of atomic bomb, all the calculation parts and how much the critical mass of the atomic bomb should be. Such things were calculated by him. Edward Teller was another scientist involved in the production of the atomic bomb, who later on went on to produce the first hydrogen bomb as well, which is the result of nuclear fission rather than nuclear fusion. Okay, so, and that hydrogen bomb, Ivy Mike, which was the first hydrogen bomb produced by USA, that bomb had a power of 400 times greater than the atomic bomb produced at the first atomic bomb produced at Los Alamos, New Mexico, which is called the Gadget. So you can imagine how strong or how powerful the hydrogen bomb is compared to a normal atomic bomb. Okay, so that is how the story goes. All these scientists are featured in the movie, so if we don't know the names of them, it's going to be really hard to understand the movie. Okay, and later on, Werner Heisenberg. Now we all know these scientists managed to produce that miraculous thing in 1945, July 16, and 21 days later they went on to drop one of the atomic bombs to Hiroshima, and 3 days later, on August 9th, they dropped one of the other bombs to Nagasaki, instantly killing about 110,000 people in both of the cities. So that is how things go. And there's another person who was the chief of Atomic Energy Commission, Mr. Strauss. He's the villain of this story, who didn't like Oppenheimer from the very beginning of this project. So he did everything that is possible to prevent Oppenheimer getting the fame he deserves. So that story, I'm not going to tell much about that story, which can be seen in the movie extensively. So Strauss is one important character, and you can see some of the parts of this movie is filmed in black and white, and some are in color, and there's a good reason for that, which Christopher Nolan had explained. The reason is the movie is sometimes filmed showing the perspective of Oppenheimer, which is filmed in color, and sometimes it comes through the perspective of Strauss, which is filmed in black and white. That's how we differentiate the two. Okay, and then after that, all these scientists won a Nobel Prize except Oppenheimer, and there's a good reason for that. Later on, Wolfgang Pauli, another scientist, Wolfgang Pauli, went on to tell his opinion about why Oppenheimer never won a Nobel Prize, though he was nominated 3 times. This is another story that we would see in the movie. Oppenheimer tells about the existence of black holes. He justifies it with logic, but he didn't do the math properly, because just having an idea about the existence of black holes isn't enough. A dying star would convert into a black hole, so much mass in a so small volume. Compared to the mass, the volume is so small with a extremely high density, which doesn't even allow light rays to escape. That's a black hole. He had that idea, but he never did the math to prove it extensively. So Pauli actually said that he didn't have the ability to sit on a chair and do these experimental things, do the math extensively. So any person who doesn't do it won't be allowed to receive a Nobel Prize, because you have to prove what you have found. He wasn't such a person. That is what was said by Pauli. And later on, at the end of his life, at the last days of his life, he actually he regretted about what he did, not the atomic bomb particularly, but what he missed during his life. He thought that he could he could have done a lot of things related to physics, but he couldn't. So he was having sort of a really bad thoughts about what he wasn't able to do during his early years. So at the age of 63 in 1967, he died. He passed away as a result of a throat cancer because he was a chain smoker. During the whole movie, we would see he smokes every and each part of the movie. So the smoking actually killed him, and he had one girlfriend and one wife. So that story is also quite interesting, which you would be able to see in the movie. And he had ties to both the girlfriend and wife, both were Communist Party members, and he had a brother called Frank Oppenheimer who was also a Communist Party member. So that is why Strauss believed and accused him of being a Communist Party member, and he also accused him of being a spy of Russia. So he had a really great fame and also a great downfall. This movie is actually based on a book called American Prometheus, which was written over a period of the information was gathered over a period of 25 years, and we all know who Prometheus is. The movie even begins with telling us about who Prometheus is and how much he had suffered. So we all now can understand why he was called American Prometheus, and it was justified. So that's the whole story. And few more things. Franklin Roosevelt died a few months before the end of the World War II, and then the vice president Harry Truman became the president, and then after World War, after a few years, he was replaced, or the next president was Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was actually the Allied Forces Supreme Commander during the D-Day invasion of Normandy. So he was promoted to General of the Army, which is equivalent to Field Marshal of many of the other countries. And after him, there was John F. Kennedy. So all these four presidents were involved during the life of Oppenheimer, which are actually, these names come up during the movie because he was accused of being a spy for Russia, and he didn't get the security clearance throughout his life following these accusations. So most of these, the four presidents I had mentioned would come up, the names would come up during the entire length of this movie. So the movie goes for about more than 3 hours, which isn't boring because this movie is quite fast paced. Though this is a biography, that's why we have to know many of these names, otherwise we wouldn't understand the story. It's really difficult to grab these names and characters because Nolan doesn't even put a year or month or location or anything. So that is how difficult it is to grab the story line if you don't know about these particular individuals. So that is pretty much it about Oppenheimer's story, and there would be a few other things that I didn't tell you, which you'll have to watch the movie and get to know. So let's see it in another video. Goodbye.